All right. Hey, guys. So today I want to give you my reaction to Arnold's response to the response of his original Screw Your Freedom statement. So let's get into it. Now, this was released yesterday, and I've got this pulled up from Generation Iron. So I'm going to just talk through some of what he says and add sort of my commentary as I go along, because there's quite a lot of it. Okay, so starting from Arnold, that's fine. They have the right to choose clickbait instead of informing their audience, wrote Arnold. If they listened to the whole quote, they would have realized that I am talking about all of the whiny babies that I see going viral on the internet who think that being asked to put on a mask is a perfect reason to throw a toddler fit in a grocery store and look like an absolute child. Right. Yeah, I mean, what he's saying to begin with, I'm not sure I agree with even right from the beginning. He's saying that media outlets, I guess people like me who've highlighted the fact that he said screw your freedom. I mean, my case in the video that I did on this topic was not trying to highlight the headline, was just simply saying the verbiage, the wording that he used, particularly the screw your freedom, but just the way he speaks, shut off discussion. And I personally thought that was where the danger was. So it's not like we're highlighting the clickbait stuff. I mean, I don't know, maybe other YouTubers have been more clickbaity. I've just tried to, I specifically focus on the words that you use because I felt they were inflammatory and I felt they closed the door on discussion. So I don't think that's fair. Plus, I'll also say, I doubt Brian Shaw just ripped his posters down just on the basis of those three words. He probably looked at the argument and didn't agree with it. Oh, and again, the way he said it, the way he was coming across. But anyway, let's carry on. So, right. These are people who yell freedom in their American flag hats while not taking any time to study the history of our nation and how freedom and duty have always gone hand in hand. They think being an American means not caring about their fellow Americans, and I'm sorry, I can't accept that. Yeah, but then there's the other side to that coin as well, isn't there? Because you could say, well, you could argue, I'm not saying I agree with this either way, I'm just trying to find a counter argument. The counter argument could be that, well, you're not caring about business owners whose life has been turned upside down for the last 2 years. You know, it's not just about freedoms; it's about people's livelihoods, right? So I'm just saying, I'm not saying I believe in this either way. My original and my issue with what Arnold said is his wordage, his verbiage has closed off discussion, and the way he's speaking now is doing it again. So he's not actually, I mean, he's not backtracking. I wouldn't expect him to backtrack. But anyway, moving on, addressing the fallout. So let's have a look at this bit. Addressing the fallout. With all of this going on, it was a wild week. One of my favorite strongmen I've ever worked with took my poster off his gym wall. Oh, that was Brian Shaw. Then a bodybuilder who played me in a movie copied that move, which wasn't very creative. That's great. Yeah, absolutely. Cooked Callum Bugger there. That's brilliant. Hilarious. Doesn't even call Callum by his name. Just says some bodybuilder. Not very creative. Hilarious. We lost the sponsor of the Arnold Sports Festival. We added new sponsors immediately, obviously talking about Redcon, sorry. When the worst thing that happens to me this month is some people yelling at me, then losing a sponsor for the Arnold Sports Festival, that's when you realize how lucky we are to live in this country. In fact, if nothing else, this whole episode has made me say, I love this effing country, because you know what? All of these people have the right to complain and they won't be sent off to prison. And I have the right to say what I believe. That's beautiful. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, and I don't think anyone has any problems with that. I mean, that is freedom of speech everywhere you go. So yeah, I think that's fair enough. It's just a case of, I get the whole freedom of speech like stuff, like I really do. And, you know, we have it here in England as well, of course. But I think it's, once you reach a certain level of maturity, you've got to understand that, again, it's the verbiage you use which shuts off further conversation. That's what I don't like. I mean, just saying, yeah, freedom of speech is kind of like that 12-year-old kid who wants to say boobs because he can, you know, like it doesn't make any sense. I mean, surely we should be promoting more coherent arguments and at least listening to the other side of the conversation in these debates. That's my stance on it, and I'll stay with that. A lot of our news sources, whether it's social media or mainstream news, and whether it's left or right, prefer that you're emotional instead of informed. Oh, come on, Arnold. Come on, dude. You can't say that we're being emotional or want our audience to be emotional when you're the one shouting out screw your freedom. That doesn't make any sense. I personally think I've been very balanced about the whole thing. I think that's a bit silly. I don't agree with that. That is it's pointing fingers. We are constantly choosing our feelings over learning and being open-minded to other ideas. We haven't been able to come together around very simple steps that can help prevent the spread of this disease. That makes me worry about how we would respond to an even bigger challenge. We have to stop making everything political, or we will be in big trouble. When the next crisis strikes us, we have to be able to come together. I get that, but again, at the same time, you could use this opportunity to actually attempt to bring people together rather than throw in the fire more oil, more divisive comments, which you know are going to pluck on people's emotions at a time like this when they are very emotional. His words and his actions are not matching up here. All right. Next up. Are our freedoms really under attack? If you are someone who thinks masks are an infringement on your freedom, can I ask what happens to you when you get caught not wearing a mask? Is it that you're politely asked to put on one, or is it that you may be asked to leave the business if you refuse? At worst, you might have to pay a fine. Was your freedom really taken away? Think with your learning brain, not your emotional brain right now. Even in the worst case, if you paid a fine and got kicked off an airline for refusing to wear a mask, did you lose your freedom? Again, I have to point out, I think what Arnold's missing here is many people have had an extremely stressful couple of years because they're business owners with shops who've been shut down, hardly any support given, while you could say Arnold's not really had to worry about that because he's been sat in his mansion, you know? So is this just, it's really stinks of a guy who's kind of out of touch. And again, I'm not saying I agree or disagree either way. I'm just trying to provide a counter argument because that's what sensible debate is. You have a point of view and you can debate it either way in a sensible way, seeing both sides of the conversation. That's what I try and do. I try and be well read on all sides. And as I said in my previous video, the biggest worry that I had last year was all of these guys, these business owners who had gyms which were shut down indiscriminately with no support, were not being heard. So their livelihoods were being taken away and they weren't even being listened to. That's a dangerous situation. And Arnold just seems to be propagating that. So not great. We can see limitations on freedom all around us because that's how society works. It is how every society since the beginning of civilization worked. And the United States, with all its flaws, is the pinnacle. We will always have more work to do. That's part of what makes us great. And this was the original post by Arnie here in his on his presumably American bike with his American t-shirt, looking extremely American. But there we go. Yeah. So I guess I've given you guys most of my reaction during the course of that video. My point is still this idea that if you're not willing to actually enhance the conversation, personally, I think you should stay out of it. I think what he's gone and done there is he's thrown in a bunch of very divisive comments which are designed to emotionally rile up people. I mean, come on, you can't accuse people of being emotional when you're the one screaming, screw your freedom. That doesn't work. I'm sorry, Arnold, you don't get a pass on that, dude. I love you, but you don't get a pass on that. That's messed up. So I think he's contributed to the very thing that in his follow-up he's rallying against. So, I mean, yeah, it's perhaps a politically screened response to kind of ward people away from what he originally said. But what he originally said was a very divisive comment. And yes, it was in the midst of a bunch of other stuff he was talking about, but still it was a very divisive comment. I don't think he should have said it. I'm not being overly sensitive or a snowflake about that, you know, but it is what it is. I'm doing it from the stance of, okay, I would rather just see people sit down and discuss things rather than have the situation where people are purposely having inflammatory statements shoved down their throats. If we're all trying to be non-emotional, then why are we making statements like screw your freedom? Right? Shouldn't we actually be discussing issues? There you go. That's my thoughts. Love to hear what you have to say on that follow-up.